All right, so last talk we were talking about how to prepare. All right, your time's up. Tick-tock. Anybody ever seen this scene before? Is it Seneca Valley virus or is it something else? So we're time zero of an outbreak, just confirmed. It was run at a non-lab. How many people know now that non-labs can run FMD PCRs for foreign animal disease investigations? I can think of at least 4 cases where a priority has been run. I think Tom McKenna Lab actually did one for Illinois as well, just recently. So that's been a great tool to help accelerate information for decision making. We've also been able to get samples to FADL from the National Veterinary Stockpile in as short as, like, from the Midwest, like 4 hours. FADD hands it off. So based on some lessons learned going back to the mid-2000s, when necessary, we can, our FADDs, the state animal health officials, the VS folks have been able to demonstrate they can compress the time of investigation down to, like, almost 12, 16 hours when we need to. So whether it took a day, 2 days, 3 days, whether it's been, we don't know. It's time zero. And I'm not picking on the swine industry here. This could be a sheep, goat, or cow as well. So what's going to happen in that first 24 hours? What are you doing? So, it's time zero. It's an FMD outbreak. It's not a good day if you're in the animal agriculture industry, right? This is a day you've all been avoiding since 1930, right? We've all been avoiding, I should say. So for the state or tribe that's involved with the index case, they're going to be initiating quarantine, hold orders, movement restrictions. There's going to be notifications to state, tribe, industry, trading partners, media, biosecurity measures, tracing activities, virus identification for a vaccine, and the start of initiating incident command teams. Okay, that's in the affected jurisdiction. What's going on in the non-infected jurisdictions? But I think that's a realistic assessment that at the start there will be questions and there will be regulatory interventions. What I call by regulatory intervention is that you'll be placing hold orders and quarantines on things that you think are appropriate at the time. And other folks are going to be, and other states and tribes are going to start saying, no, we don't want stuff from you. Or not you personally, but. And then it kind of continues the next 24 hours. And I think the one thing that kind of overlays all this is information management and communication. Internal communication, external communication, information management related to the outbreak. And that's a real tough job for all of us. Certainly the messaging, the communications, will have hopefully professionals helping with that. But even in, internally in the animal health community, in the regulatory community, the information management is going to be a challenge. So here's, we basically have written up SOPs, I think, for like 24 things, or some of them are basically placeholders to point you to other places to get, better information. But at time zero, you're basically going to be doing investigations and tracing. Hopefully, we're going to be starting surveillance plans right away. The surveillance plan for the first 72 hours and longer. Quarantine and movement controls, biosecurity measures, cleaning and disinfection measures, disposal for depopulating, mass depopulation, depending upon the circumstances. We won't have vaccine at this point in the outbreak, but we'll already be ordering vaccine as soon as we can type the virus, if we can order vaccine. And we'll be making plans for, how to do that as well. or implementing plans on how to do that. I think the one thing I haven't mentioned is kind of the concept of, well, we have to manage the known infected premises. We have to do the trace forward and the trace back to get at the disease. But how are we going to manage the non-infected premises or the premises that have a status we don't know about? Uh-oh, it's getting bigger. We're not lucky. It wasn't contained to one premises. We now got, a couple other states involved, and we still have more questions than answers. One of the things as we've discussed with stakeholders is that it's difficult to talk about an FMD outbreak because I may be thinking about a very focal outbreak in one part of the country, and they may be thinking about a widespread outbreak, across North America. So when we come together to talk about an FMD outbreak, as part of the secure milk supply, Dr. Roth and the working group, with input from a lot of people, have come up with this phases and types approach just to help facilitate how we might talk amongst ourselves and define an outbreak, and then start to describe the activities that are important for all of them, and then what strategies would be appropriate for one type of outbreak versus another type of outbreak. Going back to, what are your strategies? Well, you could talk, basically in terms of the OIE, you talk about stamping out, modify with vaccine, or you don't stamp out, you just vaccinate. Effectively, what are you going to be doing? You're either going to be not moving your animals. If you're not infected, what are your options? Not move to remain uninfected, not move your animals, not receive animals, vaccinate your animals, or come up with a system of managed movement. And there's probably a couple other there, but effectively, again, it's not rocket science, is that if you don't have the virus, you don't want to get exposed to the virus, what are the actual physical things you can do to either have 0% risk, starting with that approach, up to some kind of risk management scale. I guess this is a very crude cartoon for how if you're going to have a stamping out only strategy, then you better be prepared to depopulate a lot of animals, depopulate them very quickly, have the administrative mechanisms to do that, have the technical ability to do that. Then you also have to deal with the disposal, the cleaning and disinfection, and all those things that everyone learned from the United Kingdom outbreak. I think in our country the challenge is that even if epidemiologically you wanted to take out or depopulate as humanely as you could, but still a mass depopulation exercise, a large number of cattle on a feedlot, can we really do it rapidly enough to meet the epidemiological goals for that depopulation? And then looking at, even if you can meet the epidemiological goals, then can you actually deal with the disposal? Then can you actually deal with the costs? Then can you actually deal with the human terrain costs? The social, the personal, traumas, the community traumas involved. So then, on the other hand, if you wanted to just say, I don't want to depopulate one animal for an FMD outbreak, well, then you're talking about very severe biosecurity to the point where you're probably not moving animals or receiving animals, or you're relying very heavily on vaccine. So again, this is not rocket science, but it's kind of like you have choices, you have options, and you need certain capabilities to achieve your choices or options. Patrick's going to get into this, but I'll just this is one of those things where these are Rorschach tests where people see what they want to see. right? Zones, premises. Everybody around the world, the Canadians have their own, we have ours, and it's all kind of, essentially the same thing. You basically have an infected zone, you have a buffer zone, you have a surveillance area, but there's different terms for this, but there's kind of an internationally accepted norm that you have at least a 10-kilometer zone. And I don't know where it's 10 kilometers, maybe other than England, where they stop movement on everything and start clustering them together. But essentially, it's 10 to 30 kilometer zone, and that's what you're starting with. And when you think about it conceptually, it makes sense. We'll stop movement. We'll have a control area. We're really going to manage movement, stop movement. And then we'll have manage movements outside of that, or it'll be buyer beware, take your own chances outside of the control area. Well, there's upsides and downsides to the size of the control area. If you go small, the certainty that infected premises are contained is lower. Likelihood of disease spread is higher. The large control areas, it's saying, well, we probably captured all the infected premises within that state. But the downside is that it's harder to manage, more resources, and definitely, more impact to normal business. So when you're looking at this, things kind of make sense. This jurisdictional, geographic identification or status of infected, buffer-free, makes sense for avian influenza or somebody you have a small premises or a small group of premises. When you get to something like this, it's kind of like physics, Gravity reigns in one area, quantum mechanics in the other area. Does this type of approach really work with animal agriculture in the United States? This is going back to the Palo Duro exercise. So this will be, the epidemiologists will lock themselves in a room, and some may have argued for smaller zones than this, but this kind of would have been what was, described as small zones. And you're basically looking at 9,000 operations, 5.7 million animals. Going back to, some would argue, well, we need bigger because we know this is a system. We don't know when this was detected. We know these animals move in this system. If we were going to describe the size of the system, then you're looking at this type of control area. And you're already into 34,000 operations, many million, 15, 17 million livestock. And going back to the exercise we just did before the exercise, if you have a state that's infected and you're going to cut off the whole state, in this particular case, at the start of an outbreak, we got 3 states infected. So you're into 290,000 premises, 33 million animals. Is that manageable? Here's looking at Iowa. Now, in tab, rather than go through Iowa, I think it's tab 9. Grab tab 9 and then page 9, because I think what we did is we've done a series of maps for Indiana, Kentucky, and that may be more relevant for today than picking on Iowa. So basically, southern Indiana, if you got one infected county and the surrounding counties as a buffer zone, you got 402 operations. I guess for the control area of infected and buffer, you're looking at 2,900 operations, 74,000 cattle, 41,000 swine. That's your inventory. And the most important thing is the number of operations, the people, the human terrain that you're involved with, and all the networks that they're involved with. So as this exercise is, you're thinking about an individual farm, you're thinking about your farm, you're thinking about your industry, your farm, your practice. Also think about the geographical or jurisdictional impacts that are immediately happening as well. The next one shows I'm sorry, can you put the lights back up? No, I'm sorry, we're looking at the book. I asked everyone to turn to the book. We're looking at Kentucky and Indiana slides. I'm sorry if I didn't make that clear. Yeah, I'm good now. So if now we're up to, 5 infected counties in the surrounding buffer zone, 19,000 operations, 680 cattle, 391,000. If you were going to do a ring vaccination around that, you've got 11,000 operations and 399,000 cattle, 284,000 pigs in that yellow band, with kind of the traditional approach to ring vaccination. If you want to do blanket vaccination in addition, both the suppressive and protective, you're increasing your number of vaccines. You flip the page and it just kind of expands. Basically from 12 infected counties up to 32 infected counties. And all this is using safe NAS data, so it's not 100% accurate. It's a slice in time. It was public data from, I believe, 2007. So it's not like anything involved Prem IDs, nothing involving anybody's actual inventories, just using nice, safe, public NAS data. So if you get to, basically Indiana, Kentucky, 32 infected counties, you're up to 70,000 premises and a lot of animals. So basically I got the same slides, and you can look through this later. It's got a bunch of other states in there. California's in there, North Carolina. So the next challenge we have collectively is manage movements. Now you can call them, how am I going to feed my animals? How am I going to move my uninfected animals to a slaughter plant? How am I going to do X? And, the term we've kind of settled on for now is continuity of business or managed movements. And that involves everything from, your feed trucks, if you got feed yards, if you got milk, how are you going to move your milk? If you want to move animals to slaughter or breeding, are you not going to be able to do it? Or are you going to be able to do it in some circumstances? What does it take to work all that out? So the tension here is you want to contain, control, eradicate the disease, and that requires quarantines and movement controls. Then you want to allow movement of low risk, negligible risk, premises and animals that can be identified as either non-infected or low risk. And how do you allow them to move while still containing quarantine? That's a high order. Competing interests. And again, going back to the phases and types, if I'm thinking about something really small, well, you're going to be really tight about it. As an outbreak expands, does the thinking change? Does your strategy change? How many days can you not allow milk to move in your jurisdiction? You may not have any milk. You may be the main, may be the main industry you got. So the goal really is to link or be able to have a system for movement restrictions that's not in conflict with the managed movements. You want to protect animal health, and you want to minimize disruptions to interstate and interstate commerce as much as you can. Well, how do you do that? It's not rocket science. It's just homework. It's a lot of homework. It's the proactive risk assessments. It's being able to institute surveillance plans, whether it's active observational surveillance. If you want diagnostics, you better have the surge capacity for the diagnostics. It's, biosecurity that works, that can be implemented. It's cleaning and disinfection that can be implemented, that's effective. It's being able to share epidemiological information. And the last step, the big step, the hard step is if you're moving something from one jurisdiction to another, will the receiving state accept your findings, your conclusions, accept the risk that you say it is? If you say it's negligible, is it negligible? If you say it's low risk, is it low risk? Are you willing to take that risk? And this goes back to the top. Planning for all this is complicated. And you may ask yourself, how much do I want to invest in the planning or preparedness? And that's a fair question. What are your response goals? What are your preparedness goals? At the federal side, we've got basically in terms of response planning and information management, we have the FAD prep now. In terms of the planning with the states, tribes, and industry, we like to take that national planning approach and bring it into a regional and local planning approach, and that's the goal of the secure food supply plans. In terms of surge capacity for animal health technicians and veterinary medical officers, we have the NAHERC program. In addition to that, we have the Veterinary Services Field Force. We have the diagnostic laboratory capabilities. Dr. Sarah Tomlinson will address that shortly. So you need a lot of things. You need a lot of people. You need a lot of capabilities. And more importantly, you need these interstate or industry relationships sorted out if we want to have any chance of success, quickly. We have the National Veterinary Stockpile. I don't know, for the planners in the group, if you don't have access to this, they have like a catalog now. You can actually see what they have. They have push packs for personal protective equipment and decon supplies, individual kits, antiviral medications for the responders in the event of a high path outbreak. Doesn't really apply to HMD. They also have animal handling equipment. They also have access to national contracts for contracted services like waste management, clean harbors, and some other companies that can provide people to help with cleaning and disinfection and other activities. There was an FMD, how many here, last June there was an FMD exercise where I think 14 states wrote up what they thought their needs would be for an FMD exercise. Anybody here participate in that, writing something up? And that was and I got to apologize because the group that ran that is still working on the after action report. Maybe they'll have it out by the anniversary. But and then internally with VS we wrote up some stuff, and we'll share that as well when the after action report goes out. But one of the key messages in that outbreak was that at the time I think there was somewhere between, for the 14 states, the way each state requested it, we weren't quite sure if they wanted like a strike team or incident management team or some kind of team. But those 14 states requested like almost 300 incident management teams. And I think that that's one of the things that we've been working on hard is that there may not be 300 or 100 or 150 incident management teams available at the start of an FMD outbreak. But as those teams form and they run the NIMS and run the ICS, are they going to be able to integrate the animal health and the animal agriculture needs into it? And that's one of the key things we're trying to develop with our capabilities, whether it's a person, a service, or an activity, or a thing. How can we better integrate the activities for veterinary medicine and veterinary response and incident management teams, because that's the huge challenge.